Never believe it. They've stolen the train. The Great Train Robbery, August 8th, 1963. In context, location Ledburn, Buckinghamshire, United Kingdom. Theme train robbery. Before, May 15th, 1855, approximately 200 pounds of gold is stolen from safes on board a South-Eastern Railway train running between London Bridge and Folkestone, UK. June 12, 1924. Notorious outlaws, the Newton Gang, carry out a postal train robbery named Rondout, Illinois, and steal around $3 million, making it the biggest train robbery in history at that time. After March 31st, 1976, a train traveling from Cork to Dublin, Ireland, is robbed near the village of Sellons by members of the Irish Republican Socialist Party. At the beginning of the 1960s, life for many Londoners was poverty-stricken and drab. The austerity of post-war rationing was a recent memory, ending only 6 years before. Having acquired the taste for easy money by taking advantage of his work in a sausage factory to sell black market meat, Ronald Christopher Buster Edwards was graduating to robberies with his good friend Gordon Goody. Their brushes with the law brought them into contact with Brian Field, a lawyer's clerk. His services did not stop at preparing their defenses. For a cut of the proceeds, Field would pass the duo details of his firm's clients as potential targets. Early in 1963, Field introduced them to a stranger known only as the Ulsterman. Believed to be Belfast-born Patrick McKenna, this corrupt Manchester postal worker brought intriguing news. Large cash sums were being carried on the overnight mail trains from Glasgow to London. A tempting target, if above Goody's and Edwards' pay grade, they took the information to an experienced South London criminal called Bruce Richard Reynolds. In the months that followed, Reynolds started to put together that hook ding. Am I one of a minority in feeling admiration for the skill and courage behind the Great Train Robbery? Graham Greene. Best laid plans. The plan was elegantly simple. The gang would stop the train in the open countryside of Buckinghamshire at Sears Crossing, close to the village of Ledburn, where a signal could be interfered with. While this was the perfect place to stop the train, high embankments made it unsuitable for unloading the loot. For that, the train would be moved to nearby Edgar Bridge. The mail train was typically long, its cars manned up by up to 80 postal workers who spent the journey sorting letters and packages. The gang discovered that high-value packages, or HPVs for short, were stored in the second car from the front, so the gang planned to uncouple just the first two cars. Once they reached Edgar Bridge, they could unload sacks of registered mail using a human chain from the high embankment to a dropside truck waiting on the road below. Reynolds refused to leave anything to chance, so in case the hijack driver refused to carry out their demands, one of the gang would spend months studying locomotive manuals. Posing as a schoolteacher, he persuaded a driver on the suburban line to take him along for the ride. Watching closely, he picked up certain basics. Reynolds also recruited a fully experienced driver to make sure. Field, meanwhile, negotiated the purchase of the abandoned Leatherslade farm, roughly 30 miles from Sears Crossing, which would be their hideout after the robbery. It is the British press that made the legend that you see before you, so perhaps I should ask you who I am. Ronnie Biggs. Signal victory. Just before 7 p.m. on Wednesday, August 7th, the train left Glasgow with veteran driver Jack Mills at the controls and his co-driver David Whitby beside him. The HPV coach was carrying over €2.6 million, about 68 million today, in cash rather than the usual €300,000, 8 million today, in US dollars, or so the gang had been expecting because of the United Kingdom public holiday on the previous Monday, during which time the banks closed. By the time the train reached Sears Crossing, gang members had tampered with the signal lights. They slipped a glove over the green light to blot it out and wired up the red stop sign to a separate battery. A surprise mail brought the train to a halt, and Whitby went to investigate. When he tried to report in from the trackside telephone, he found that the wires had been cut. As Whitby made his way back toward the train, he was hurled down the steep embankment by men in motorcycle helmets and ski masks. Meanwhile, gang members wearing masks and gloves climbed into Mill's cab and knocked him unconscious with an iron bar. Others uncoupled the cars from the rear of the HPV coach and overpowered and handcuffed the postal workers. It soon became clear that the replacement driver, a retiree known as Santa Gate to the gang, was unable to operate the state-of-the-art Class 40 diesel-electric locomotive. So having knocked out Mills, the robbers had to revive him so he could take them up to the line of Britigo Bridge. Passing the mailbags along a human chain down the embankment, the gang quickly loaded the truck. Warning the handcuffed postal workers in the HPV carriage not to call the police for 30 minutes, the gang made their triumphant way back to the hideout at Leatherslade Farm. Above here, this picture, the train was halted just before Britigo Bridge, where the gang formed a human chain down the embankment. They loaded the loot onto a waiting van where the black car is. An inevitable slip-up. It was indeed a, quote, great train robbery, unquote, and if it all sounds like something from a movie, that is because in recent decades, such elaborately organized heists have been much more popular with movie makers than with dumb criminals. Not only are crimes like this risky, but they are enormously labor-intensive. Up to 17 men appear to have been involved in the robbery, although to this day a few participants remain unidentified. The gang members would split the loot evenly, so as not to cause division, which would have added a potential source of danger. However, the high number of people involved carried risk, such as the gang member being indiscreet with his loot or talking about the robbery. In the end, an acquaintance of the ringleaders imprisoned himself and hopeful of a deal, passing some gossip that he heard through the grapevine, providing a vital lead for the investigators to pursue. Obviously, you are a thief because you like money, but the second thing is the excitement of it. Buster Edwards. The plan unravels. Meanwhile, in the robber's farmhouse, confidence had given way to tension. The plan had been to lie low for a week, but it was soon apparent that the police, systematically sweeping the surrounding countryside, were closing in. Detectives noted the robber's 30-minute warning to the HPV carriage staff, which suggested a hideout within a half-hour's drive. Police searched Leatherslade Farm after a neighbor reported unusual activity at the farm. The robbers had gone, but fingerprints were found in a Monopoly game they had played using real cash as well as in a ketchup bottle. The conspiracy's collapse was as abrupt and chaotic as its planning had been patient. 11 of the robbers were quickly caught together in South London. The majority of the 11 were jailed for 30 years, a severe sentence for a crime in which nobody had been killed. However, it helped generate sympathy for the robbers. 2 of them escaped prison. In August 1964, friends of gang member Charlie Wilson broke into Birmingham's Winson Green prison to snatch him. The next July, Ronnie Biggs climbed over the wall at Wandsworth Prison in London. In this picture, Leatherslade Farm, later dubbed Robber's Roost by the press, was searched by police after farm worker John Maris tipped them off, convinced the robbers were hiding there. On compassionate release. On August 6, 2009, after falling gravely ill with pneumonia, 80-year-old Ronnie Biggs was released on compassionate grounds, a rarity in the United Kingdom. Under the Prison Service Order 6000, a prisoner can only apply in the event of tragic family circumstances or if he or she is suffering from a terminal illness with death likely to result within a few months. Biggs survived until December 2013, but this courted little controversy. By contrast, 2 weeks after Biggs was released, Abdelbaset al-Megrahi, convicted of the 1988 bombing of Pan Am Flight 103, was freed on compassionate grounds by the Scottish Judge Secretary, a decision condemned by the U.S. and British press. Megrahi had been diagnosed with terminal prostate cancer, but his release from the hospital caused an outcry as did the arrival of Colonel Gaddafi's personal aircraft to repatriate him, and the hero's welcome he received back home in Libya. Mythical status. The robbery's audacity could not be denied, but the long-term trauma inflicted upon the train crew was easier to ignore. Mills suffered from post-traumatic headaches for the rest of his life and never fully recovered from his injuries. Whitby died a few years later at the age of 34 from a heart attack. However, these tragedies were overshadowed by an increasing romanticization of the crime, and intensified by the fact that only a fraction of the €2.6 million, $68 million, haul was recovered. The robbery occurred at a time when brazen reverence toward old-fashioned authority was in vogue, and at a time in which artist Andy Warhol claimed that everyone would be famous for 15 minutes. Biggs recorded the music with the Sex Pistols, and Edwards became the subject of the film Buster, 1988, in his part played by rock star Phil Collins. Just 3 years after the crime, the Great St. Trinian's train robbery was released, playing on the idea that serious crime could be comic entertainment. Ronnie Biggs. He's subjected to being dismissed as the gang's T-boy, but Ronnie Biggs' role could hardly be considered crucial in the Great Train Robbery. Born in Stockwell, Well, South London in 1929, he was a somewhat hapless burglar and armed robber when he met Bruce Reynolds in Wandsworth Prison. The Great Train Robbery was to be his first and only major heist. His main responsibility was the recruitment of Stina Gate, the gang's replacement driver, who was not actually able to move the train because he was not familiar with the type of locomotive used. Biggs' fingerprints were found in a ketchup bottle at the gang's hideout, and he was arrested 3 weeks later. He escaped Wandsworth Prison using a rope ladder on July 8, 1965. He traveled to Brussels and on to Australia before settling in Brazil in 1970, which didn't then have an extradition treaty with the UK. Eventually, Biggs returned to the UK on a jet paid for by the Sun newspaper in exchange for exclusive rights to his story. Biggs was arrested minutes later after landing at RAF Northolt on May 7, 2001.